of Minnesota in the late 50s and early 60s. The local TV stations would come on at 10 p.m. with a half an hour of news, weather, and sports. And it was 15 minutes of news, followed by 5 minutes of weather, followed by 10 minutes of sports. I was just watching the Weather Channel here today. In the immediate wake of this Hurricane Helene, April and I were in West Virginia, and we were getting a fair amount of rain that was part of this huge system, but nothing like what we can see happen on the coast of Florida, where this Cat 4 hurricane hit, and the amounts of rain that fell in parts, and the storm surges, and they were giving out numbers like things not seen since the 1700s. The weather, particularly in the immediate wake of Helene, is a big part of the news right now. And that's getting to be more and more typical of our era. Back in the 50s and the 60s, everybody was, concerned about the weather. Whether was there a plan for a picnic on a workout, and it's also an agricultural state, Minnesota, and so there was a tradition of telling farmers, this is what the forecast is, so they would know whether to make hay while the sun shines. But it was very peripheral. Most of the time. I mean, maybe once in a while some tornadic system would come rolling off the prairies of the Dakotas, heading toward the Twin Cities, maybe, and people that supposed to keep an eye open for things. But once in a while. But now we get extreme weather events on a much, much more regular basis. I'm not in a position to give you statistics, but I'm sure they're out there. The frequency with which a whole bunch of things happen. Not only the stuff having to do with tornadoes like Harvey that parked over Houston and dumped rain, inches and inches and inches of rain, and then a system like Helene that just dumped 20 inches of rain on some parts of North Carolina or Tennessee. Wow. But not just hurricanes. I mean, these fires, wildfires from British Columbia down to California, whole communities getting burned out. It becoming more and more expensive if we want to look at the economic aspect of it, which we should. It's not the most important aspect of it, but people down in Florida are having trouble getting insurance for their homes. I don't know the details, but what I just said is accurate. And there are problems also in California where people are living close to what could become an area consumed by a wildfire, like there was in that town that PG&E sparked something, and all these people got burned forever out of their homes. This is a different era with respect to climate, and we get to see it all the time. Now, I really like the Weather Channel, but the Weather Channel is kind of politically cowardly in avoiding, at least as far as I can see, avoiding talking about how part of the story is not just here comes a storm surge, it's going to swamp, a mile inland when the hurricane gets close. It's not just an event. It is part of a pattern of events that have made weather a big part of the news. the history of the world is going to be very much impacted by the same set of forces called climate change that we see in our headlines with all the weather-related things and the escalating cost to our economy of the damage that's being done by, oh, well, hurricanes are certainly big and wildfires. But then when it comes to people dying, 40 plus now in this hurricane, but apparently the real killer is heat. And part of climate change is not just hurricanes that aren't like our father's hurricanes, but also heat waves that go across American cities and kill hundreds of people, maybe. And then in Europe, sometime in the last several summers, a heat wave that had a death toll well into the hundreds. Climate change is, I like the word climate disruption. Because it kind of captures an essential aspect of this, that we've sort of upset the apple cart. It's something that was more or less stable has been destabilized. And that's what happened, and we don't know exactly how it's all going to ramify. But it's clear that it's going to be very important, and we can talk about droughts and migrations and how migrations have been demonstrated across the globe to be politically destabilizing, leading to Sweden having a semi-fascist government for a change. Even Sweden couldn't handle all the immigrants, a lot of whom are moving because of climate change. Analysts say that the Syrian civil war, which generated a huge wave of migration into Europe and helping to advance fascistic powers, climate change caused the Syrian civil war, according to analysts. That's not the only factor, but it was the instigator. So we're looking at something that's going to be the weather or the climate is going to be impacting the news, meaning the great shape of history as nations try to absorb migrations, as international conflicts get exacerbated, as fascism gets aided because people are feeling afraid when they feel invaded by a whole lot of people who are different from them into their own homeland. This is just what we can see is if we don't necessarily have to endorse that's how people should respond, but it is a reality, and it's a reality that means that climate change is a real threat to to the human future. And we really should be talking about it and addressing it in a very serious way, way beyond what we are. Politically, my wife, who is a climate activist, so I come by this by osmosis a lot, but not just. She has observed that as far as she can tell, the Weather Channel never ever mentions climate change. Now, I don't know if that is factually true. We don't have a big enough sample. But we did see an interview as Helene was approaching the Florida Big Bend. They had DeSantis. I'm blocking on his first name for this some reason. But DeSantis, the governor of Florida, was on the Weather Channel. He was very impressive. I mean, they talked about all kinds of dimensions to this situation, gearing it to protecting the lives of the people of Georgia who are going to have to deal with this thing that was coming at them. I'm no fan of DeSantis. I relish the way he showed himself to be something of a weird human. I abhor all the ways he's behaved politically, uh, uh, not least that he has, I think, outlawed anybody in the Florida state government speaking in terms of climate change. I mean, really. You can't even talk about something which is recognized by pretty much the whole world except for the fossil fuel industry. Uh, I mean, he monstrosity. But he's a Harvard man. As a Harvard man, I'm quite prepared to think that he's actually pretty smart. And he sure showed it in this interview. I mean, he was fully in mastery of not only the names of all the places and their place in the general picture of Florida, but also the ins and outs about what to avoid. And, don't, when the eye goes over you, don't be lulled into thinking that the coast is clear, because it's just a very temporary reprieve. Stay hunkered down. A whole bunch of stuff that had to do with really helping the state of Florida and the citizens of Florida absorb this terrible blow while minimizing the damage to property. Well, there wasn't much you could do about storm surge, so I don't think there. But in terms of helping save lives, keep getting people to where they should be, so that they can survive this blow. Anyway, he was very good. But the conversation never got to anything like, well, Governor, it is widely said that these more extreme storms that we see, the unprecedented temperature of the waters in the Gulf of Mexico that are feeding these systems so that they keep strengthening and strengthening. And instead of coming in as a tropical storm or a Cat 1, here this Helene is a Category 4. And the scientists will tell us that what's going on here is part of the whole picture of climate change. Well, you might say, reasonably, maybe that didn't belong in that particular conversation, because you're trying to help people through the next 12 hours or whatever. But if you want to help them and their children and their grandchildren through the next 3 or 4 generations, they really should understand that the weather is becoming the news because human activity has destabilized the Earth's climate. And the scientists have been telling us that this is what's going to happen, more extreme events. This is the scenario that they've been laying out for years. I mean, it's important for us to know this, because it's widely recognized that though a lot of problems are already baked into the cake, what we do now could make I don't really know what the evidence is for how much, if the whole world started behaving responsibly about this, how much better would it be than if we continue the way we're going? And it is relevant also to tell people who are watching the Weather Channel, not all of whom are Floridians whose safety you're concerned with, but also the rest of the country, because I was tuning in because somehow I feel drawn to watch these things develop. That you could help inform the people about what our choices are. I mean, we have a president. It's not just that we have a hurricane coming. We have a fascist political party with a fascist political leader contending to be for the presidency in whatever it is now, 5.5 weeks or something. I mean, that also is stuff that we need to know. We've got one political party that has been the worst major political party, I'm talking about the Republican Party, on climate change of any major party in the advanced democratic world. I think the Republican Party has been the only one that's essentially just done the bidding of the fossil fuel industry and denied the problem and paralyzed the government as best it could from taking any action that really meaningfully addresses. I mean, I think the Inflation Reduction Act that Biden got passed is really the first real defeat of the Republican Party as agent of the fossil fuel industry to paralyze the United States. And we've got a candidate for president in Donald Trump, whose whole relationship to the climate change issue is to be on the side of ignorance and denial. So this is something that even the Weather Channel perhaps should be telling people. The problem is that we have a political economic system in which someone like the Weather Channel is making a decision about how to report things that is geared toward maximizing their profit. I mean, I could imagine that if I were running the Weather Channel and it was my job, I saw my job as being maximizing the return on our investors' investments. I can imagine that if I felt like that was my job and I didn't have any larger jobs with respect to the wider world, but just to maximize the wealth, I can imagine that I'd choose not to do anything to challenge DeSantis. I mean, that was a great interview. You got a relationship with him in which you're able to deliver. The governor of Florida doing an outstanding performance that shows that when he wants to be a rational guy, and he wants to accomplish something good, he has the capability of doing it. The problem is that he is fundamentally aligned with things that make things more broken. Almost all of his other activities, besides trying to save Floridians' lives in a hurricane, they're almost all destructive. Destroying the First Amendment, the way he hires and fires, destroying the Florida university system with political corruption. A fascistic regime. What is it, a 6-day abortion ban too? You know, there's a lot of fascistic things that you can see in this guy. And you let him, because he's the power, you, the Weather Channel, you stay on his good side and you stay on the good side of everybody out there in your audience. You don't alienate the people who are concerned about climate change, and you don't alienate that big piece of America that has not taken seriously. They've been told lies about the climate change. I was on TV almost 30 years ago here in the Shenandoah Valley, arguing with the chair of the Republican Party about climate change. Already it was clear that there was a problem. Already the Republican represented denial. And a whole part of America is walking around backing into this future without really understanding what the hell's going on. It's a kind of a tragedy, because I live here in the Shenandoah Valley, and these people who deny climate change, who are willing to vote for somebody like Donald Trump in a party like the Republican Party that's just been a tool of the fossil fuel industry. And yet these people also love their children, and they love their grandchildren, and they would hate to inflict on them greater suffering, maybe lesser chances of survival because of they were supporting the wrong political force. This is just a little piece of the larger propagandistic problem that we have in America of a whole lot of people who are not in relationship to the truth that allows them to play a constructive political role. Not only this about climate change, but believing also the big lie that how the hell can you believe any of that? So it's not obvious how you can break through that and get a political system where the good people of America who love their grandchildren act in ways that are clearly what a proper weighting of the interests of their grandchildren would have them do. And telling people about climate change, even at the cost of coming up against the resistance that the right wing gets when it comes to any of the immense range of issues that they've decided is something you got to fight over. Black Lives Matter, the rule of law is, widespread, and this is just one piece of it. And how you penetrate that, I don't fully understand the mentality of people who are intelligent, who can believe things that are so obviously false, including about climate change. I mean, when the whole field of climate scientists say there's a problem here, and points to, okay, so that's why the news and the weather have changed relationships, where one is sort of a little casual afterthought in 1960, has become by 2024 a big part of the overall trajectory of the human story, because we have destabilized the climate and we are required, with the greatest of stakes of the survival of human civilization, perhaps, required to take certain kinds of ameliorative action. Yeah, we don't have to lay a trip on ourselves that we made this mess. After all, we're creatures who just 10,000 years ago didn't have to worry about our impact on the planet, and really didn't have to worry much about our impact on the planet until, well, it's just been just a matter of a few generations that this environmental awareness has developed in a significant way. It's a new problem for us to think about, and yet we have been growing so powerful as a civilization that the impact of our behavior is now such that we might destroy ourselves by it, by carelessness. And part of that carelessness is the result of politics that have gone awry. A decent politics would not have so much trouble having a civilization respond appropriately. And we live in a democracy, and the decent politics has to do with having a population that's got a decent understanding and a decent set of values, so that they collectively will favor the political force like Kamala Harris that's going to be decent and might even be really competent, versus putting their political support to a political leader and a political party and a political force that is wantonly acting destructively in the world. And part of that is to use these events like Hurricane Helene to get people to look at some things that are basically true, like that climate change is happening, and it means what it means. And the ramifications of that understanding for their whole political stance. It should be enough for any Republican voter to recognize what their party has done about climate change, even if you knew nothing else about supporting a criminal leader or any of that other stuff. If it's just all you knew was about climate change, that should be more than enough to reject that party, because the stakes are huge and they are on the side of the force of destruction. That easy. And a lot of the people around here I see as good people And they got no business aligning themselves with basically with evil, with destruction. Yet they do. And if I knew really how you change whatever it is that's happened to make that possible, well, I would love to be able to tell you I understood. But part of the way we ought to try to change that is to continually expose the whole nation, as Weather Channel could, to this picture. We got the hurricane. We can put 95% of our attention on this immediate situation, but 5% should be putting that into the context that this is one of the greatest challenges to ever face the human species. And the implication is we need political leadership that will respond responsibly if we're on the side of the good. You can't be on the side of the good and support this Republican Party. Climate change is sufficient proof of that. Thank you, and bye-bye till the next video, which might be about